Hi, I'm Sam here at Rick Jones Pianos with a Steinway Model M that was built in New York City in 1988. This is the 5'7" grand piano model in Steinway's lineup, and as I understand it, their most popular grand piano. With good reason. It's the smallest of what we would consider just a medium grand piano, below 5.5 feet. At least in our reckoning, we call it a baby grand. And the M, incidentally, derived from its original position in Steinway's line when they introduced it in 1911. The M stood for miniature, and the oldest Steinway M's that we get actually have miniature embossed on the plate. Because at that time, they did not yet make a baby grand. A lot of other companies struggle to make a baby grand sound good. This represents the classic Steinway sound. They haven't had to change the design on this piano, by which I mean the scale design, by which I mean the shape of the cast iron plate, bridges, soundboard, ribs, case, how that all determines the positions of the strings. All of that determines the essential tone quality of the piano, and that's why Steinway sounds like Steinway, Yamaha sounds like Yamaha, and so on. They all have their own ideas about how a piano should sound. And, well, Steinway nailed it pretty much from the beginning. It's been the same exact scale since 1917 on this Model M. Haven't needed to change it. It's been very popular ever since amongst their piano offerings. And what I mean by that classic Steinway sound, warm, typically American warm, rounded sound. This particular one I think has a especially soft, delicate, mellow sound. And a very consistent transition between all the different parts of the keyboard. They all have the same voice, even though the strings are singing at very different frequencies. Steinway, in their great experience and wisdom in the early 20th century, was able to achieve a design that had that. And that might seem kind of commonplace today, but back in the early 20th century, a lot of piano companies struggled to make a piano that had that type of sound. They were different sounds and different registers of the piano, didn't have the same voice, and especially in the transition from the bass to the treble where the strings cross over, that was very often a rough spot in those early small, medium grands and baby grands back then. And the transition point stood out like a sore thumb, not on a Steinway. It's in there, it's between those two notes. And you never be able to tell that those are on two separate pieces of wood, bridges on the soundboard in very different positions. They sound very similar. And that has been, in my opinion, a large part of what has made Steinway so legendary. That plus how big the pianos sound. It has a very deep, full sound. It sounds bigger than 5'7". Although I think this particular Steinway happens to be especially mellow, really warm and gentle sounding. It won't overwhelm a small room, but it has that reserve of power if you need to bring it out of the piano with whichever music you're playing. The piano's ready for that. And in my opinion, every Steinway grand model tends to sound bigger than it looks. All the way down to their baby grand Model S, all the way up to the Model D concert grand. Those really project into a large room, and this projects very nicely into a relatively modest living space. So I said a lot about Steinway generally, and I have mentioned in particular this piano is quite mellow. I'll rate it a 4 on a scale from 1 to 10, from mellow to bright. 5 being a neutral sound. There's really hardly any hint of harshness in the tone of this piano anywhere. It's just everything is smooth and soft and gentle, very introverted, very warm, very mellow. In that respect, I think it reminds me a lot of more recent Steinways that I've played, ones that have been made since the 90s to the present day. The tone quality of Steinway it's been essentially the same for a long time, but there are different periods. If you ask technicians, including myself, I work on these pianos. Different time periods of Steinway tend to produce slightly different sounds, and before the 1980s, in my opinion, they were more likely to have a bright sound, not as much after 1980. And this is very much, in my opinion, a good representative of its time period for Steinway, which continues to the present day. And if you are a student, for example, who has to be able to play on a Steinway at school, pardon me, and your school has all Steinway products, that can include the Boston and Essex pianos too, but many schools are like that. They have that agreement with Steinway to have only Steinway piano products. That's all going to be recently made pianos. And so this, in my opinion, feels and sounds very similar to a recently made Steinway. It doesn't have a light touch, it doesn't have a bright sound. It's a very warm, mellow tone and a firmer touch. Very similar to what you have to play at school if that's your situation. And likewise with the teacher, if this is a piano you want to teach on in your private studio, but you also teach in the school, I think you'll find this to be a very similar musical experience to what a school would have. Although, I'll add, in better condition, this piano was not used very heavily by its previous owner. We wouldn't be able to make it look this good if it were abused. This is the original satin ebony finish, we did have to rub out some scuffs on the finish, but they were not deep, and, well, you'd be hard pressed to find any imperfections on the piano. I mean, I see a tiny bit there. We can touch that up, no problem. It looks, in my opinion, like a new piano, and certainly in better condition than the average piano you find in school. So, we wouldn't be able to put a 10-year warranty on it if the piano were really worn out. We would replace parts, and we do replace parts on Steinways, but that wasn't necessary on this piano because the previous owner didn't play it very much. They took good care of it. And with the quality of the parts with which this piano was originally made, Steinway using only the best available, at least in this country, with proper care, you can expect this piano to last many more decades with its original parts. You can expect to enjoy it and continue to play it and have a rewarding musical experience for a long time. And by maintenance, though, by taking care of it, I mean regular twice-a-year tunings and then a moderate, stable humidity situation. You always want the piano to be, no matter the brand name or size, to be in a situation where the humidity is moderate and doesn't change much. That's important for the wooden components of the piano, especially the soundboard, because you don't want the moisture content going up and down with the change of the seasons, putting stress on the fibers of the soundboard, compresses them in the summer when it's humid, opens up a crack later on in the winter when it's dry. You want to do as much as you can to maintain the piano in its home. And that way, that is how you can expect to get many years out of a piano like this with its original parts. We expect it to outlast all of us. Even if it needs to be rebuilt in 80 years or whatever, it's certainly a piano that would be worth doing so because of how well made it is originally and because of how much a treasure Steinways are, an American treasure musically in this country. So I mentioned that. And we have our 10-year warranty on all parts and labor. We also have 100% lifetime trade-up guarantee. I mentioned maybe more as a formality. For many pianists, this is easily their last piano. It's the piano they upgrade to after everything else has been less than satisfactory to them. And especially so if you have a relatively small space. But if you buy this piano from us, take good care of it, and you decide you have to have a more expensive piano one day, most likely larger, you can do so and trade this piano in precisely for its instrument sales price. That's what we mean by 100% lifetime trade-up guarantee, and that applies to everything we sell. Oftentimes teachers are recommending students to come here for an upright at first and then to upgrade to a grand. Sometimes later on still to upgrade to a Steinway grand. We make that possible as long as you take good care of the piano. And you can still trade this in the future if you want, and if you have to have a larger Steinway one day. But as I said, rest assured that if you take good care of this piano, you can expect many years out of it. And Steinways they're very much workhorses. You can play them heavily and they'll still sound good. They're very well built. The materials that they use in the construction of the piano, the hard woods, it's not something that a lot of other companies have access to for the quantities that they need to make their pianos with. But Steinway doesn't make as many pianos as other companies, particularly when this piano was made in the 80s. So they can afford to really source the finest hardwoods in the rim and all the other parts of the piano. And we can tell as technicians taking it apart, it's a really solid piano. So the trade-in is an option if you want in the future. And I should also mention that a new Steinway M, which they still make in New York today, it looks basically like this, same thing. The MSRP is $98,700. And it is also understanding that if you go to a Steinway dealer, they don't have to come down on their prices. Either you pay their price or you get a different piano. For the price of a new one, you could buy 2.5 of these. You could buy 2 of these Steinways and have plenty of money left over for a vacation or whatever. We challenge you to go play a new Steinway, see how nice it is for yourself. We're sure it is. As technicians, we'll see the recent ones in, and we can tell the quality has remained high. But we challenge you to see for yourself and play this piano and see whether the new Steinway plays and looks and feels and sounds 2.5 times better than what we have here. You're welcome to make your own conclusion regarding that matter, but let it suffice to say, I think you'll be very impressed with this piano. It's very satisfying to play with its mellow tone and firm touch, very similar to a modern Steinway. One more thing, it does have its original duet bench. This is the hard top matching satin ebony duet bench, and Steinway benches are very substantial. If you prefer, we could switch this out for an artist bench that has a cushion and adjusts up and down, but that does not store sheet music. This one does store sheet music, and it looks really good. Obviously, it wasn't sat on very much by its previous owner, and this is what originally came with the piano. So we encourage you to take it so to keep the two together, but if you want, you can get an adjustable bench instead. Well, please stop by. You can play this for yourself. Try this out along with anything else in our inventory. But if you can't make it, you can always give us a phone call or send us an email if you have any questions. Thanks.